Now, we have Emancipation Day coming up.
We do.
Next week, Tuesday. And I actually found it interesting. I do wonder if, as a Caribbean island with, of course, direct history with regards to Emancipation Day, we're not just some country that was kind of like secondary or indirectly involved. You know, we're directly as a result of the practices.
Being a former colony.
Being a former colony that started
Sugar
off with slave
plantation.
labor, right. Sugar plantations. I don't know if culturally, societally, we truly, really appreciate it in the right way.
I would say I have to agree with you. And I don't know if it's because of when Emancipation is celebrated. I was thinking about that. Emancipation being celebrated on the 1st of August, in the middle of the July-August vacation. I hear we're calling it Java now. Maybe you know, a lot of what we learn and a lot of what we celebrate comes from what we learn in school.
Yeah.
There is no school at that time.
Yes.
So where are we given the opportunity to inculcate the celebration of emancipation or encourage from young, because you have to encourage people from young to recognize certain things. So how can we get it culturally ingrained? Because
what made it worse is that when I was growing up, that was Great Race Weekend.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Right.
Well, sorry, no, not Great Race Weekend, but if there was a weekend around that time, obviously,
yes,
right?
It became more of a party versus...
And then it became a party weekend,
yes.
right? So it became a party time. So the weekend might not be August the 1st as it isn't now, but it's a party time this weekend in Tobago. And who's really going to, you know, the race was moved.
Right.
But I think also your point is correct. The fact that, well, yeah, we never learned about it in school because
I
we didn't have
don't recall
school.
really learning about it in school. I did history up to Form 6.
Yeah.
And yes, it basically ended, and yes, 1834, Emancipation, 1838, when they were really free because they had the 4 years of apprenticeship. And this morning I was thinking, what was the 4 years of apprenticeship for? That's a by the way discussion I was thinking, because why would you need to be apprentice to something that you were doing for years and years? I thought to myself, why didn't I ever think about that before?
I could barely remember it. This is the thing, right? I could barely remember that aspect of it. I would assume it was a political thing to kind of get emancipation through without, you know, removing it completely.
Well, actually, I mean, the proclamation was in 1833. It was passed, the bill was passed in the Parliament in 1833, it was declared in 1834, and my understanding is it kind of gave that 4 years more for the planters, the colonial masters to kind of become accustomed, and it was also a period for them to get some compensation. But, I mean, how did they convince for the people who were enslaved, because we're not calling them slaves, they are people who were enslaved.
Well, to some extent,
how did they sell it to them?
Think about it.
Yeah.
When it was being sold, they were slaves.
When it was being sold to them,
when the idea and the concept, they were slaves. So there's much room
for them
disagree,
to argue of needing a 4-year apprenticeship.
And then, like, if you're going to be free in 4 years, why revolt now? Why risk your life now?
Well, I suppose so. Right? So I guess it was an easy sell, right? So we had...
I mean, part of it, too, is, the other thing is, think about it, like, the concept of it and all. It's not as though I'm explaining to you that the grass is green and the sky is blue and water is wet. I'm not explaining to you a natural phenomenon. I'm explaining to you this thing that I made up in order to be politically expedient for the people that I want to benefit at the time.
I suppose.
So some of the slaves at the time who might not even understand aspects of Western culture and Western law and legalese.
Yes, freedom, apprenticeship. What do those words mean?
I don't know. I just know I'm in chains. I'm going to be out of chains? Okay, cool.
I suppose. But, I guess, but in terms of a modern Trinidad, I guess, what does it mean to us?
Yes.
What does it mean to us?
Because I do find it interesting. One of the thoughts I had was, there are those who kind of hold on to the negative, the oppression of slavery, as though they were slaves themselves somehow, right? And then they kind of, I think one of the root causes of the division is the fact that slavery and indentureship are not the same. And because those experiences were not the same, there will always be that sense of, well, y'all didn't go through what we went through. And I feel as though, while I understand that it was not the same, it's like, we do have to kind of figure out how to, like, not stay stuck in that past. That's part of it.
Well, you said so much that I had, like, several thoughts going through my head. The first being, you were saying that some of us are stuck. And before you mentioned the word indentureship, I thought you were meaning to say a lot of people from of Afro-Trinidadian or African descent are stuck on the egregious nature of slavery. But the matter, what I would argue is the flip side, that the slavery has been, in a sense, whitewashed. And I'm not trying to be racist using the word whitewash.
Yeah.
That's just the word. But it has been whitewashed and downplayed, the harmful effect physically, mentally, on the enslaved people themselves and transmitted through generations. I think it has been whitewashed. And I was actually listening to a clip talking about there are actually places, and even in the Caribbean, where you can go on a plantation tour. But what they said is, that person was speaking about the plantation tour, said they did a survey before and after the tour, asking people what they knew about slavery before and what they knew about slavery after. And it was the same, which was nothing. Because the tours, they have watered down and romanticized the experience of slavery. So we don't want, and I can understand, we don't want descendants of colonial masters to feel bad all the time that their ancestors did this. But again, we have to face the reality. It was a horrible experience.
Right. So when I said when I said what I said, it wasn't to face the reality or to acknowledge it. Because I did say I don't think we really give it its due to understand the gravity of what it was.
Yes.
But more, I feel as though it's more used to win a fight as opposed to
divide us.
To divide us, as opposed to this happened.
Right.
And we need to acknowledge it and not celebrate it, but it's kind of like...
Let's celebrate the emancipation part.
Right. Well, there's the other thing. How much do we really celebrate about it? Because I feel that should be like fireworks.
Well, then that's so before. The other thought I had...
Not necessarily Great Fete Weekend,
but the other thought I had when you then went down the route of indentureship is that emancipation seems to be a holiday that is only recognized or celebrated, and I can't even say by all, by some, dare I say, conscious members of the Afro-Caribbean community or the Afro-Trinidadian community. And I would like it to become more of a national festival. And maybe it's because of what you said, that the other non-African groups or non-African descendants in the country perhaps feel isolated for various reasons. Maybe they feel like some Africans may be using it as a bargaining chip to say, well, we went through more, or those who were descendants of colonial masters feel bad, so they don't want to talk about it, or they just don't understand it.
You know, in the States, there's this all of a sudden a hard line with regards to cultural appropriation. Right? So it's like you can't wear the dress of a different culture, the hairstyle.
I think America, they have gone extreme with that whole...
Right.
They clearly don't know the difference between celebration, appropriation, and recognition. There's a difference.
Right, and sharing the experience.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, you can make the argument too, Indian Arrival Day, Emancipation Day, these things are major milestones for the country that makes us who we are.
And I think all Trinidadians need to recognize. Now, I have participated in a few of the emancipation processions in downtown. Because, you know, we have that walk on Emancipation Day. And I have seen people who are not phenotypically Afro presenting in the festival or the procession, but there are few. But as I was thinking about it this morning, I wondered why. Again, is it because others feel uncomfortable to come in a procession where people are all dressed in African wear, but then when it's other holidays, Trinidadians have no problem wearing clothes of other ethnicities in the country. I always feel like, why is there no... I mean,
this is a bit more of a lighthearted example, but there was a phenomenon when the movie Black Panther came out.
Right.
And I'm acquainted with somebody who is, you know, not Afro descent.
Right.
There's no mistake. He is,
right.
I think he might be Portuguese descent or something like that. You know, he is white. But he was a legit fan forever.
Right.
But of course, that whole, I mean, of course in the States as well, again, craziness, right? You saw where
I think that it came out during the Black Lives Matter too, so that probably didn't help.
It didn't help, but you saw how far it could go. And these sorts of topics tend to be sensitive, and I understand to some extent. Look, Holocaust survivors are sensitive as well, but it's sensitive in what way? Because I would think sharing in the celebration and learning about what happened and being able to participate will help educate better, as opposed to, no, it's not for you. Go away, it's not for you.
I agree. So there's work to be done on all sides, all individuals in Trinidad. We need to find a way that every Trinidadian can feel comfortable to celebrate and recognize that is an important milestone. 50% of the country, more or less, I don't know, CSO, correct me if I'm wrong, is of Afro descent. That was a large population of people who were not even viewed as people.
Yeah.
There was a large population of people who were stripped of their identity, and I think some of those psychological ramifications from slavery still live on today. I think that may contribute to why a lot of young Afro males, it is arguable, why they are often caught up in certain activities because of a sense of identity as an Afro-Trinidadian, identity as a Trinidadian, identity as a young male. There's so much things.
I mean, there is a part of me that does want to, it's weird. I think slavery kind of happened at a transition point in history because there have been a lot of atrocities in the past that, you know, people have just had to, well, it was just the way the world was, right? You just had to get over it. You know, civilizations were destroyed in some cases. But slavery was in this unique time where we were moving past that. You know, we were kind of still in it. We still had major wars. We still had a lot of death and, you know, World War I, World War II, the wars in Africa, colonization, the wars in the Middle East, the wars in South Asia. But we were transitioning to a point where, well, no, we're not necessarily gonna just, oh, you conquered that person, oh, well, that's fine. We're not gonna accept certain things anymore.
So an awareness,
it's an aware time in history because awareness is increased, but at the same time, it came from history where, well, humans weren't nice to each other on a whole.
Well, humans are still not nice to each other, and then
but that is true.
But you know, and then there's the argument of why was there even an end to enslavement in the Caribbean? So that's a whole other topic. It's not necessarily, some would argue, it's not because we liked these people. It's because it became economically not viable to have slavery anymore. That is one of the arguments I think Eric Williams posited in his book. It was a decline in the plantations. It did not make economic sense to continue to have these plantations with enslaved people.
I think it was more that it didn't make political sense.
Well, it was, so again, as I said, I did history.
What I would go
I did
with.
history, and I argued all the different factors why it ended. There was a political push, an economic push, and then the enslaved peoples themselves pushed for their own freedom.
One of the things that, and
we have to break?
Yes, we have to break. But I do feel one of the things we need to understand too is that even the whole, because from what I understand, the whole, what happened to the African slaves and their identity and their humanity and being stripped away from them, all of that was manufactured just for this. It wasn't as though this was an ideology that was rooted in some sort of, you know, ancient civilization that was just, to me, it seemed as though all of this kind of was manifested just to get this, just to allow the slave trade to happen and people not to feel bad about themselves because they realize this is not a war prisoner from a neighboring country. We are just going to a distant land to take people.
So we don't want to call them people. So we don't want to call them because our good Christian selves can't you know, deal with that. We can't reconcile the two. So we have to figure out a way, right? And to some extent, I'm sure there were people who, okay, it's politically convenient now, let's push it now because this craziness needs to end. So it's a dynamic time in history, I think, which makes it even more complicated because it's not as though we have the internet and back then,
phones with cameras and all the media to record everything that happens so that we know who said what and who meant what. And the UN had a...
So what I found I would have expected, so let me start from the beginning. In December 2013, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 68237 and proclaimed 2015 to 2024 to be the International Decade for People of African Descent, with the theme People of African Descent, Recognition, Justice and Development. And I would have thought the decade gone by, because we're coming to the end of the decade, with that being the decade of people of African descent, I would have seen more in the way that we have celebrated emancipation in Trinidad. I don't know, and I can't say it has not happened, if those Emancipation Support Committee and other groups have sought to integrate the UN year to really push and make emancipation celebrations bigger and more educational. One of the things that was supposed to happen in this year is to promote greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent to the development of societies. And for me, emancipation is not only about, okay, we were enslaved and now we're free. for me, it's supposed to be a door for us to talk about what has happened since. Now that we are freed, how have people of African descent in Trinidad really contributed to the development of the country? And I just haven't found that to be a thing that we have promoted.
Because also there's this catch-22, right? Because we were kind of talking about it. Other people migrated. So if you migrate from Europe to America, from America to New Zealand, from China to Trinidad, and you choose to embrace your local country, that was all a choice of individuals. Internationally, what we saw was people from one continent was moved to the Western Hemisphere, basically, the Caribbean and North America, the southern states of America, generally speaking. And it's a different type of phenomenon. And one would think that there's like a common experience, cause for celebration. There's a lot to be had there culturally to recognize, hey, you know, this happened here. As opposed to, it wasn't just, well, you know, one by one we migrated. You know, yes, we have migrants now. It's a different story. So the UN now recognizing a whole decade, and maybe it's because international bodies have too many days, months, years. I don't know if it's just lost in the shuffle, but the UN recognizing a decade would have been not just an opportunity for Trinidad to celebrate, but also to kind of include, you know, the rest of its Caribbean brothers and sisters. We had CARICOM, and we had, I think, a representative from, I can't remember which, I think, not Ghana.
It was supposed to be Ghana, but I feel like I didn't hear a lot about if they actually came.
No, right, but we had representatives from the US. We were supposed to have representatives from the UN. You know, to join in on that ceremony. You know, this was a time when the Caribbean itself could have.
Well, I mean, there's still time. Emancipation. I mean, Trinidad and Tobago. Again, I don't know if you would have known. We were the first country in the world to declare a public holiday. I mean, Emancipation celebrations have been celebrated throughout the Caribbean before 1985, but we made it a public holiday in 1985. And I feel, yes, us being the country, the first country to declare it as a public holiday, this being the decade selected by the UN, there could have been some sort of celebration, Caribbean-wide, probably led by us to promote people of African descent.
Does it have to be on August the 1st? Can it be moved? Because that does seem like a clunky day. I don't know if they did not realize what the school holiday was, or maybe at the time.
No, it was. I would want to assume it was selected because that was the day of the actual proclamation in 1834.
I'm not a student of history in this regard. So it's been a while.
I am almost 100% certain that was the day it was proclaimed, so that was why that day was selected. I agree with you. It's just the circumstances around it. It'll be very hard culturally to kind of, you know, make that shift. It's like, hey, stop vacationing and pay attention to this. I mean, we are in the age of social media, though, so that should not, it being in the middle of the holidays and people dispersed and students not in school, should not be a problem now for us. We have the whole Emancipation Village. Stream the celebrations live. We have webinars. We went through a whole period of a pandemic where we became accustomed to logging in and learning about things. Why, again, I am not hearing a lot. I guess I may know because I know about these things, but I don't feel like I'm being inundated, and maybe because we're in election season, all I'm hearing about is elections.
That is true.
But I'm not hearing enough about the upcoming Emancipation celebration.
One last question. I asked you this off air, but I want to ask you on air. So, you know, don't want to try to directly compare the two, but with regards to the Holocaust, they have Holocaust museums to educate. The whole idea is never again, right? And I believe you made the point on air that when people go to plantations, they get a watered down
romanticized version.
Romanticized version.
Yes.
You know, how wonderful it was.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Sipping tea.
Right. Should it be that we should have plantations like museums where you get the real deal? You get the real deal. It might be harder in some respects because it's not as though you could say, well, this many people were killed in this gas chamber. It's not so
the statistics were not as obvious.
Were not as obvious. Exactly.
Were we really recording?
But you know, to do a better job to kind of understand, well, listen, This was not, you know, a picnic. This was not voluntary services.
Yeah, it's not like you're working in picking apples in Canada.
This was not a 5-day-a-week, 40-hour work week thing. Those people were property.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were treated as such, and to kind of get that message across.
I don't know if we necessarily need to recreate a whole plantation.
Not to recreate it, but
I think a very good argument can be made to have a permanent fixture. We have statues here and there. We have the Emancipation Village that is set up temporarily for a period of time around Emancipation. But maybe we should have a fixed home where we can have items and information and the history about slavery.
Yeah, exhibits.
Exhibits. We can have exhibits.
Because
I don't want the significance to be lost.
All right, so we have a caller from San Fernando, so we'll transition there. We'll take this call and then we'll have to say goodbye to Janelle because of time. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, morning, Sean. Morning, Janelle.
Morning.
I would tend to agree with Janelle that the reason for the choosing on the 1st of August, because it was really 1st of August 1834 that they had, it was the day that they said was, they call it Freedom Day.
Right.
In Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the issue of the schools not having, the children not having a avenue to celebrate, I think is one of the reasons why it is not being taught in that sense. It's not being discussed because, for instance, so Arrival Day, you have school time, you have children being able to dress up in their traditional or cultural outfits, but that does not apply for people of African origin in Trinidad and Tobago. So they don't have an opportunity, and I personally feel what they need to have in Trinidad and Tobago is something called National Day during school time, where children of all origin, Syrian, Chinese, Indian, African, can dress up in the cultural outfit. That might have a sense of bringing a lot better unity in the country. Let that day everybody dress up in their own cultural outfits. And I agree with Janelle. I think it is possible for us to move that from the 1st of August. I think switching that day with Republic Day, because on the 1st of August, 1976 is actually the day where we declared our republic. I think move Republic Day to that day and move Emancipation to the 24th of September, which is a school time, and that might have a little more effect of having a little more, what would I say it? Having the children participate, because that's where the education starts down there. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
I like the idea, but actually I would advocate, if we want to push unity, make people choose to dress up in a different ethnicity. So then again, it's not so much, okay, I'm Chinese, I'm wearing Chinese. We get to appreciate another group. Maybe stick your hand in a hat, pull out whatever you get. Ooh, I'm wearing Chinese, I'm wearing...
I think both ideas are good. I do wonder if potentially then there are other ways to do it. You could have one day for each culture where everybody dresses up.
Of course, we always have to think about costs, eh?
Right,
those
right.
cost factors.
That's the other thing, what's available
and
who might be left out, unfortunately.
Yes.
But I think it is a good idea.
Yeah, I like the National Day.
In order to everybody to share, and perhaps you could get... Everybody could get a little bit of information. But
I know we have to go for a break, but before we go, I do want to take the opportunity to wish everyone in Trinidad and Tobago a happy Emancipation Day in advance.